This is called Magnetizing Your Executive Job Search. So, just a teeny bit about me. I've been recruiting for over 20 years. I've been on the retained executive side since 2008. I went off on my own. It took me a long time to quit my job and start my own thing. I had a non-compete. I waited out. I launched a month before COVID. So, Feb 2020. I hung my shingle of distinguished search, and the timing was interesting. So I didn't have a lot of clients right in the beginning of the pandemic when everyone was trying to figure things out. So that's really what was the catalyst for the book, and we're going to talk about that a little bit now. So Jay is someone that I've known for years, and in the beginning of 2020, when things were crazy, I was just reaching out to executives saying, you know what, how are you? How are you doing with COVID? And I found that when I didn't have a role to pitch, like normally as a recruiter, you're contacting someone about a position, but when it was just a no agenda conversation, people had a lot of things to say about recruiters and about executive search in general, and a lot of questions. And Jay was someone that he came to me and he was like, look, I have a new boss. Boss came in. They're bringing all their own people in. I thought I was going to retire from here. I'm getting layered and I need to look. And I haven't looked. I haven't looked in like 15 years. What do I do? How do I get the calls from recruiters? How do I develop relationships with recruiters? Then he started going on interviews and I was keeping in touch with him. And he was getting a lot of feedback that he was too junior. And he was getting really frustrated about that feedback. And so I followed up with him for a long time and he eventually landed in a big C-level role. And I asked him how he did it. And so a lot of that was kind of that domino that led to all these different conversations that led to this book of here's how to get the calls, here's how to position yourself. So I interviewed Jay, he's in the book, and others. And it was just listening to folks and the questions they had. I was posting on LinkedIn. I'm like, there just needs to be a book about this. So today we're going to talk about how to become a job search magnet, some do's and don'ts with recruiters, compensation, everyone's favorite topic, and feedback. Um, so I like to think about job search magnet is how do you get positions to come to you versus knocking on doors? Hey, I'm looking. Hey, I'm looking. Hey, I'm looking. Do you have anything? Do you have anything? Like, how do you become that, have that gravitational pull where positions are coming to you instead of you having to go find them? So, the most important thing, first and foremost, is to understand exactly what recruiters do. And by understanding what recruiters do, you'll position yourself in these phone calls in a way that is relevant to them and it makes it a little bit more of a relationship and less of a transaction. So recruiters fill positions for companies versus helping people get jobs. And I know a lot of people know that, but if you think about a lot of the emails that I get and that a lot of recruiters get, it's like, hey, here's my resume. Do you have anything right now? And that ends the conversation very quickly. But if it's more of a relationship and more of positioning yourself for the future, you'll be thought of, it's all about how do you get thought of first for what's next, right? So whenever we kick off a search, you want to be the first person that people call. So we're going to talk about how to be that versus do you have anything for me right now? So who do recruiters reach out to first? So this is a picture of my wedding bands from my actual wedding. I'm actually an East Coaster. Traditionally, I'm in Austin now, but I grew up in New York, and this is I was outside DC, so this is in Virginia. And my husband, before he was my husband, we were at another wedding. We were at his friend's wedding. We were kind of early on in our relationship, and he took me as a guest to this wedding, and this band came on, and they were awesome. Like they were just fun, full of energy. We were dancing, having the best time. And Steve, my husband, he said to me, this is going to be the band for our wedding. And he's like shouting over the music. And I said to him, I'm like, is that the proposal? Because we weren't even engaged yet. And the funny thing about that was that when we went and he did propose and we did plan our wedding, we knew exactly who the wedding band was going to be, and we didn't go online, do research, do all of the, go on to Google reviews. Like, we're just like, you know what, who was that band at that wedding we went to? And we just called that band. And so that's what I'm trying to get across here is how do you become the wedding band? How are you that like, oh, let's call Bob, let's call Matt, let's call Tom for that role versus how do I optimize my LinkedIn profile to be found, which is important. But in terms of who I call first, oh, I see questions in the chat and that is my bad. Let's see if there's anything other than introductions. Not yet. So feel free to ask if anything pops up so far. So in terms of who I call first, they're people that are lodged in my brain. I talk a lot in the book about think of me when. So they've left their three lasting impressions, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. I also call past candidates first. So people that have interviewed well or took feedback well. So whenever I kick off a search, I first look at past searches I've run. It could be a year ago. It can honestly be 5 years ago. Um, I was working on a head of data engineering role or chief data officer role, and then they changed it to be more of head of data engineering. I went through my network from, and this was a year ago, from 2018 when I worked on a head of machine learning search. I do a lot of tech work for banks and called those people that I had interviewed then to ask them for recommendations for this new search. So being someone who leaves a lasting impression in the past as a candidate, even if didn't even go ahead to the client, those are people that they call first. Past targets. So maybe I always look through like for a past search, who have I called in the past? Maybe they weren't interested personally, but they were responsive. They actually wrote me back and they were respectful and they maybe gave me a referral or two. Those are people that I'll call again. And I'll also, when I worked at a bigger search firm, I would literally walk around the office, ask people who they knew for the role. So recruiters do share candidates across teams, but it's more of a deliberate sort of act where people have to go around and ask for referrals. Who I call next? The people that those people tell me to call. So the tip here is when you launch your search, in order to be that gravity, to get that gravitational pull, it's planting seeds with people in your network so that when recruiters call them for roles, they give your name because now you're the referral. So if I'm working on a CFO search, let's say, since I know this is a finance community, if you reach out to all your CFO friends and say, hey, you know what, confidentially, I'm looking for these sorts of things. If recruiters call you for CFO roles that you're not interested in, please tell them to call me. And then all of a sudden now you jump to the top of the list because now you're a referral. So it's trying to get those leads to come to you and igniting your network to think of you when the next thing comes along. Who I call third, people that I don't know. So it's first people I know, people that they know, and then it's searching for new people. So in terms of the three lasting impressions, I like to phrase it as think of me when. So if you think of whenever a role kicks off, there's a journey. There's a journey that the company is about to go through. So recently, I've been working with a company that is a bank and they're going through becoming a tech company. They're creating this whole embedded banking technology platform. So I'm thinking in my head, who has helped a company on this journey of becoming a tech company? Who's gone through that journey before? And the people that go through their resume chronologically, they're harder to remember. And I think that's what most people do when they call, when they reach out to a recruiter, they have their monologue that's pretty memorized. And they say, look, here's who I am. Here's what I did. I worked here, I worked here, I worked here, I worked here. Here I am, and I'm looking, and do you have anything for me? But the biggest thing is to be memorable is to take your whole background because what doesn't show up in your chronological order of your titles and your companies is because of all these experiences that you've lived. What does that make you, why does that make you great at what you do today? And so thinking of those transformations. So telling recruiters, hey, you know what? Think of me when. Like, think of me when you talk to a client where there's a strong team in place and they need X, or a company needs to scale and they need this, or a company grew too fast, or a company needs to go global, or a traditional company needs this, or whatever those journeys are. Because all we're doing as recruiters is we're matching journeys. And so if you can think of your whole background and say, look, I've taken companies public, I've gone global. I've done this for smaller companies. I've done this for startups. I've done this 3 times. This is what I'm really good at. So when you need a client going through X, think of me for that. And because I've done it here and here and here, it makes me really good in these different scenarios. And that can be a quick 1 to 2 minute pitch versus going through every single role, title, role, title, role, title. Does that make sense? All right, cool. So in terms of being a giver, this is and we're going to get into how to approach recruiters for positions. What's interesting about creating relationships, and Amy has a question. How does the think of me when differ from an elevator pitch? It might not. It's just my take on elevator pitch. It depends on how you are thinking about an elevator pitch. I find that sometimes people they have a soundbite, something that's kind of catchy. Um, I find that a lot of people talk in big generalizations. They don't really get into the transformations. And I like to know, like when people can like succinctly summarize the transformations that they've led companies, people's cultures through, then that's the think of me one, because it's more of positioning yourself for where you add value to the next company versus only what you've done in the past. So maybe the elevator pitch is more so summarizing what you've done versus the think of me when is where you add value to what's next. Um, but when you're approaching recruiters or anyone really when you're networking, it's important to be a giver. And Adam Grant talks a lot about this in his book, Givers and Takers. And the picture of the penguins is up here because when I launched my website, uh, back in the day when I first launched my company, it was very bad. I'm not good at graphic design, I'll just say it. And so I had a lot of penguins. I thought they were distinguished. They were searching. And what I did was I reached out to people in my network, my favorite C-level candidate friends, and they gave me a lot of feedback on my website. And one in particular actually drafted what my website should look like and sent it to me as a screenshot and said, hey, make your website look like this. And those people are the ones that stand out, the ones that helped me, the ones that were not just, hey, do you have a job for me? Do you have a job for me? But they were really helping me build my business. It was a very different way to approach a conversation. And so when you think about contacting recruiters and thinking, what do you have to give? It's really instead of saying like, hey, do you have a job for me? Hey, do you have a job for me? Hey, do you have a job? Hey, I'm checking in. Hey, here's my updated resume. You can say, you know what? Let's talk about the market. Let's talk about what I've been seeing out there in the job market and the trends I'm seeing, the types of companies that are hiring. I'd love to share that with you and hear what you've been seeing. Let's talk about positions that I didn't land. I've had candidates do that before too. They've called me and said, "Hey, I just interviewed for this position. I didn't get it. If you want to give it a shot." They wouldn't introduce me necessarily, but they said, "Hey, give it a shot. Give them a call, see if they want to work with a recruiter." Introductions to potential clients, that could be, hey, if you're ever looking for an introduction to a head of executive recruiting or HR, happy to make those connections for you. Or candidates, hey, I know job seekers that are really good at XYZ. Happy to chat through any searches you have going on right now and see if I can help you out in finding other candidates. And these are different things to approach a conversation, different excuses or reasons to stay in touch or reach out to people. Any questions so far? All right, so let's get into some do's and don'ts. Okay, so here's an example of a don't. This is an email I've received. Hi, Somer. I'm interested in a new opportunity and possibly engaging with your firm. Perhaps you have clients, or you may shop me around to prospective clients who have a need for a marketing executive. When you have a few minutes, perhaps we can have a short conversation regarding whatever particulars you feel comfortable sharing with me at this time. If you'd like me to call you, please let me know the best time. All right, why would you say, you can put in the chat, why would I put this in the don't pile?
That's a lot of perhapses.
Yep. Passive language, a lot of
Yeah,
perhapses,
have a little guts. Like,
right?
yes, I'm the person you want to be working with. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Well, I thought the call to action puts it back on you, Selmer. The call to action should make it easy for you to connect.
100%. Yes. It's a very wishy-washy call to action for sure. There isn't one really. Let's see. Derek said not actionable 100%. Amy, you don't work for him. Yes. As we talked about, recruiters find people for positions versus like shop me around. Like already I'm like, that's not what I do. It's and it's confusing sometimes because there's contingency recruiters, then there's retained executive search. And I talk about a little bit in the book. And I grew up through contingency. Like I grew up where it was, and this is before LinkedIn. So it was like a book of phone numbers, call these companies, pitch this candidate, get them interviews. So sure, sometimes if you're that person, you're the product, right? But you might think people shop you around, but when you get to this level, that's not what's happening. You know, we are sending in, like, a retained recruiter is doing a full market study. We're going, it doesn't have to be slow, but we're sending in the top 5 to 10 people in the world for that role. We're not shopping people around. So it's different. So yes, he doesn't get what I do. What else? Anything else? All right. So there's a couple other things I would point out. Um, One is I don't really place marketing people. I wouldn't expect you all to know that, but at least just go on my LinkedIn or something and know what I do. Um, the other thing is this email. I get this same exact email with the first 2 sentences, and really all these sentences exactly the same, probably every other week. So I think someone's selling templates or something. And so when I see this, I'm interested in new opportunity, possibly engage with your firm, like, oh no, another email. So it's not personal. It's not personal to me. He's not saying why he's reaching out to me in particular. The other thing I'm saying is he's not being a giver at all. Yeah, like Amy said, I don't work for him. I'm working for the companies. All right, here's a do. Hi, Somer. I hope you're doing well. Thanks for connecting a while back. I lead digital at Money Bank, and we're undergoing some changes over the next few months. At that point, I will be seeking a new role in the digital space. I was hoping we could have an introductory chat when it's convenient for you. You may have spoken to a few folks here at the bank already. I think you know Jeff. All right, why do you think I'd put this in the do pile?
He gives a referral name
Yep.
that you have the same contact.
Yes.
And he tells you where he wants to be in his new job segment.
Yeah. It's also succinct. You know, it's not like, I'm sure you guys get those emails where it's you have to keep scrolling. You know, here's what I want, here's what I do, here's my whole resume, copy and paste it. It's just one paragraph. So he says what he wants to do, and you know, we'll talk more about it, but it's short. You know, I find the longer something is, no one reads any of it. Anything else?
It's got a warm tone to it.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like he wrote it, you know? It's just like normal language, like we're talking. And the other thing I like too is we're undergoing some changes over the next few months. It's it's more of that relationship versus a transaction. Most of the emails I get are, here's my resume. Do you have a job for me right now today? 9 times out of 10, no, right? And then the second you say no, it's like you move on. And this keeps the conversation going for the future. And he knows how it works. Like as a recruiter, typically it takes 3 months to fill a role, let's just say. Sometimes longer, we all know. So, but you know, if it's faster than 2 months, like that's very fast at the senior level. So I would say every quarter is a good cadence to check in with executive search people. So I like his mindset of few months because that's usually new searches kick off, that sort of thing. Do you recommend attaching a resume to an intro email? I would say no. I would say it's a good excuse to follow up with a resume. Personally, I feel, and I might get, you know, people might disagree with me on this. I view resumes as following you, views versus introducing you. I know people spend lots of money and time on resumes, and you should maybe, but I like the resume to back up what people already know about you versus people making assumptions on what you do based on your resume. Because I'll tell you, if a resume is like, people will make some assumptions pretty quick. So I'd rather the resume follow you and have a good excuse to re-email someone later, versus putting too much up front. You know, it's I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but it's kind of like if you send your Calendly link before you've really engaged with someone, it's a little like, right? Like it just feels weird. It's like asking someone on a date, putting it all out there, and you haven't even talked to them yet, right? So it's just too much. So I'd say just like you want a little bit of ping pong back and forth. Let's have a conversation before you show all your cards. Um, let's see.
Well, one thing I might add, Summer,
Yeah.
to that is I know a number of the bigger placement firms like Robert Half, they all have these automated services now where if you send them a resume, it just snips it off your email and punches it into the system. So the recruiter's not even looking at it per se. So I think that kind of reinforces what you're saying. It's like much better to, you know, start building a relationship and then make that connection.
That's the thing. Like the thing is, whenever people, in my experience, when I did contingency and retain. So more junior, even more senior. Whenever we kick off a search, it's very antiquated. Like you sit around, you put your head in your hands, and you think, like, who do I know? And then you walk around and you call your colleagues, who do you know? I mean, if last you're going to go type in, like, who are all the CFOs that we all know in this whole company? So you get too many. It's just too hard, you know? So I would say just the more you can be memorable and spend time on those lasting impressions, that's how you get the phone call. So yeah, I'm with you. You don't want to just get into that pile. Um, Raja said, I think you know Jeff. Is it name dropping? But if you don't know Jeff, I mean, at least he wasn't like, I view name dropping as when you're trying to gain credibility. Like I know Mark Benioff, I think you do too. You know, it's like when you drop a big name and you're trying to be more senior. Um, so I'm okay with this one. And he's not assuming that I know Jeff, so I'm okay with that too. Is it best to do a call for an intro versus an email? Yeah, phone calls are definitely best, but you're not going to always get them. And I mean, recruiters are filling jobs, right? Versus helping people get jobs. So we're going to talk about how to stand out and get the call. But yeah, you definitely want to try because you'll be more memorable that way. Here's another do. Happy New Year. Hope you're well. I want to introduce you to George Copied. George is looking for his next opportunity in the product partnership space. I worked with him at Indigo, hold him in the highest regard. George, take it from here. So I have to respond to this, right? I mean, this is a CC. So now be careful, make sure George is good and won't stalk people, right? So like what you have to remember is anyone you CC, now your reputations are linked forever. So like people will judge you by the people you surround yourself with. I'm sure you do that too to folks. So, you know, I wouldn't do this all the time, but if you know someone great, you'll be memorable to the recruiter. Like I know, okay, this person I talked to yesterday came from that person I placed 3 years ago. This person has a gold star, like 5 gold stars. So getting referred is awesome. All right, and here's the last one. Bill here, we spoke a few years back when you were with your last firm and you were Somer Conley back then about a search you were running. First of all, hope all is well with you and your family and at Distinguished Search. Congrats on starting your own firm. I mean, look at that. It's all about me for a whole paragraph. Like no one does that. Like it's great. I'm writing today to try to set up a short phone call, winding down a long-term contract assignment, starting to explore what's next. Love to reconnect, hear how things are going for you and with your practice, give you a little more info as to what I've been up to since we last spoke. Of course, I'm happy to provide referrals for any active projects you've got going at present. How does your schedule look in the next week or so? All right, what else do you all like about this email? Anything else stand out?
Offering to make introductions and help them out first.
Yeah. He's such a giver with the whole thing, the whole tone. It's me, but he does put in there what he's looking for too, but it's not, it's just different, right? It's not just about him and hey, I'm looking, and it's really like 75% about me. And I'll tell you, when I talked to Bill on the phone, he started out the conversation with, I've talked to 7 recruiters in the past 2 weeks, and this was in like mid 2020. So I was just, you know, I started my own firm. I had no clients yet. The pandemic, I had all this momentum and then it was all gone. And so Bill was like, look, I talked to 7 recruiters in the past 2 weeks. These ones said everything went on hold. This one said these sorts of companies are still hiring. And he just gave me so much information about my competition and how they were struggling. It made me feel good. It just made me feel validated that I didn't just make the biggest mistake of my life. Like I just had to wait it out and COVID would not be forever and it's okay. And it was just so cool. And Bill told me, because I interviewed him later for the book, and he said he kept a spreadsheet and he asked every single recruiter he talked to the same questions. He asked them what they're working on. He asked them what types, like what they're seeing in the market, trends, this and that, like comp, all kinds of stuff. And then all he did was tell those answers to the other recruiters. So now he's this insider of cool information that we all want to know. It's awesome. It's like so great. We don't like, I don't talk, I have some recruiter friends, but we don't talk about this stuff all the time. So I loved his approach. And remember, it's like you're trying to be memorable. That's different. That's such a different way to go about it than, hey, here's my resume. Let me go through my, hit play on my monologue. So the general do's and don'ts, and I can send you all the presentation after, so you don't have to write down so quick. But Don't send generic emails. Don't have your only goal be, do you have a job for me today? I'd say don't ask for resume review. A lot of people are like, hey, can you help me write my resume? Like, don't ask recruiters for that. It's just, you're not going to be memorable. Your goal is to be memorable. And recruiters don't write resumes, honestly. I wouldn't go through your whole background for 30 minutes. I'm sure you know when you interview someone and they just don't stop. And you're like, oh no, how do I get them to stop? And you start checking email. So I'd say don't do that. Don't ignore recruiters when you're not looking. That's the easiest way to get these relationships going is when you get emailed or in-mailed or messaged or called by a recruiter about a role that sounds pretty cool and they sound half competent. I'd write back to them. And I wouldn't size people up based on seniority, meaning associates, researchers. Some people think if I know the partner at the search firm, I've got my bases covered. I know everybody. They know me. But the problem is the partners, they're in business development roles. So they're spending a lot of the time flying around, whining and dining, and I'm generalizing, but I've been a partner and that's why I went off on my own. I love recruiting. I love like doing the actual work and knowing the candidates and everything. And so if you know the partner, they might not actually be the one that thinks of you for the search. It's like when I was an associate, like I would go find candidates. I would look in the database. I'd be like, oh my goodness, you all met this person 3 years ago. They're perfect for your role. I called them. They're great. I remember the partner was like, no, like they're now a CEO. They're not technical. I'm like, no. They are. You need to meet them. Like I would advocate internally, like I do now with clients on the external side. But when you're an associate or director or even a principal, sometimes the principal is that first kind of revenue generating role where you have a quota and things. You're advocating for candidates. You're the first point of contact. You're the one researching, finding candidates. So I would say sometimes it's better to know the more junior people because they're the ones doing that legwork and presenting it internally. So on the do side, make it personal. I would say make it about, it doesn't have to just be like showering people with compliments, but just show that that email is just to them. Like even if you're like, hey, look, I see on LinkedIn that you specialize in blah. I'm curious, I do this. Are you even the right person at your company to talk to, or is there someone better? Like just it could be 2 sentences, but it would just really stand out. Getting referred, being memorable, checking in once a quarter, engaging when you're not looking, and engaging with all the recruiters. Any questions before we move on? All right, cool. The number one do, I don't know if you know the Seinfeld where Elaine has the hospital gown and she doesn't want to wear it because she's got this like, mole on her neck. And then she gets this doctor wrote on her chart that she's difficult. And then she gets this reputation, so she has to not go to this practice anymore. And so then it gets so bad that she goes to it. She's like, forget this doctor's practice. She goes to this other practice down the street. And then they're like, oh, hi. And she put the gown on proactively. Look, I'm such a good patient. And then they get her chart and they see difficult and the doctor's demeanor changes. So word travels, just be nice because she didn't think the doctor's offices shared information, but not everyone's nice out there. And it's especially important and it goes both ways, right? I mean, you'll remember what recruiters are nice to you and who isn't. So that's the number one do. All right, let's talk about comp. All right, so when I ask people, what are your compensation expectations? These are the 4 answers I get. Number 1 is too early. Number 2, what's the range? Number 3, here's what I'm making now, and I want to make more. And number 4 is, here's what I'm looking for. And Adam Grant has a whole podcast on this called The Science of the Deal, where he talks about whoever shares their number first actually ends up getting what they want. Because in economics, there's this anchoring concept. And I know a lot of people say, what's the range or what do you think or this and that, but now you're giving all the power to the other side. And the people that know what they want, I'm telling you, they get what they want and they've done the research. And it's important we'll talk about how do you find what you want, but if you think about it, if you're just standing there on the dock and you and the recruiter have the anchor and you throw it in the water at whatever number, like it's going to kind of sit there, right? Like if you set a number on day 1 or if they set a number on day 1, you will never forget that number ever. And they won't forget your number. And so it's important, like you can move the anchor, but yeah, it's called the podcast is called The Science of the Deal, I believe, by Adam Grant. If you Google it and don't find it right now, let me know. But it's an awesome podcast. So they talk a lot about sharing your number first and anchoring and how those people get what they want. I saw Thomas wrote something too. I just don't want to miss it. Seems most opportunities today are for PEIB backgrounds for tech companies in the media space. How do you position your experience to get past that barrier? I know we kind of moved past that topic, but really quick, just to answer that, I would say as a lot of what I do is cross industry work. So I do a lot of work for banks, but I used to work for this one big bank that said, please do not send us candidates from banks. We are way advanced with, and I do a lot of tech, so public cloud, machine learning, yada, yada, customer experience. And so it's up to as a job seeker, it's up to you. Remember those three things we talked about, 3 lasting impressions? If you're looking to leverage your background to other industries, don't make those about industries. You know, the more you say IB, PE, this, that, the other thing, people are only going to think of you for that. But like, I can talk about more with tech, but if you think low volume, like high availability, like certain things, I can think about airlines, or if someone, sorry, going a little off topic, but I would just say recruiters don't always have the ability to draw parallels between what you've done and what the journey is that the company is about to go through. And so if you can think of your journeys as overarching journeys that can help other industries, the better. We can spend more time on that when I can think of better examples, but let's get back to this one. So David said, I just heard the person who can give the dollar amount first loses. Could value setting kill the conversation or be too low? Yeah, for sure. So if you don't, let's talk about how to find your comp expectations. I think that will help. So if you share your comp expectations and they are too low, then sure, like you'll get something that's too low. But it's hard to find online what you should be asking for. So you have to create your own personal secret data set. And I'd say the way you do that is you talk to recruiters about positions when you're not interested in those positions. So you can create, and we'll get to more examples of how to do this, but creating, there we go. Thank you, Angela, for finding the podcast from Adam Grant on this. But because if you go on Glassdoor, if you go on all these websites, like they talk in too broad brushstrokes, and executive comp gets very complicated. There's base, there's bonus, there's equity, there's sign-on bonus, there's vesting schedules, there's what do they do with your invested equity, there's all kinds of things. You're not going to find that online for the most part. So talking to recruiters about positions when you're not interested, you can try all the things. You can say, you know what, I'm looking for this. Can your client pay that? And they're like, sure, not a problem. You're like, maybe I should ask for more because that was too easy. Or if you're like, I'm looking for this, can your client pay that? They'd be like, oh God, no. Like now so you're kind of finding your own worth, but it's based on actual roles versus game time. So the pressure's off. Folks ask other people what they make. Also, there's public company information. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more. So Sanjeev is in the book, and he said every time he talks to a headhunter, he'll talk about compensation. He said, when you give, make sure to ask. So he told me he created an Excel spreadsheet. He had all the different roles every recruiter talked to him about. He had industry, he had comp breakdown, how it works, and he kept that sheet for years. And then all of a sudden now when you're interviewing for a company with, the role that you want, you have this huge data set of like, I've talked to companies about all these other positions and all this other compensation. So you at least know if you're too high or not. And because certain companies, the base might be lower or higher, the equity is lower or higher. But like you were saying, you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot and say something too low. So that's one way. Miriam, she's a Black woman, and she asked her colleague what he made, who was a white male, and she was just in shock. I've known her for years, and she couldn't believe it. I'm like, yes, go for it, do it. And she got it, but she asked around. I know that's not always appropriate, but she did it, and at least it gave her a little bit of a reality check that she could go for that. Amanda, she's someone that was at a tech company going to a bank, and she's going for a C-level role, and she had no idea. It was just different the way that they paid. She'd never worked in financial services before. So she looked at all the public company statements. They put the top executives' compensation there. And so then you can look at your potential offers competitors, and she used that information to negotiate her compensation. So just different ways to look at it. I think also oh, here we go. I did put a quote, the science of the deal at the bottom here. Very small. But Adam Grant talks about what I love about this concept is it's solving a puzzle together. Someone had asked me once, like, should I wait to bring up compensation until it's later and I have more leverage and this and that? And I was like, I really don't think of it as a leverage conversation. I think of it as you want to hire me, I want to work there. How do we make this work? Right? And if you can confidently know what you need and why, then you're trying to solve this together versus having more of this ultimatum or this weird back and forth. Does that make sense? I also think the recruiter can help you with this. I know that Sri said earlier there's a little bit of a real estate and people ask me too, like what's that? I was talking to a candidate 2 days ago. He was like, and I was talking about compensation because he's way above the compensation range for this role. And I told the client, and they're like, okay. And they even before first rounds, they went and figured out what they could do. And he was asking me, he's like, what side are you on? Like, are you getting paid more if I get more? Or do you want me to make more? Are you? And I view our role, especially when you get to the executive. First of all, I told him I have a flat fee with this client, so it doesn't matter. Like I care more about repeat business and just a great experience than anything. But I do view our role as recruiters is protecting the brand, protecting your brand as a job seeker, and helping couch messages. I can put things on me. I can say, I think you should do X versus so and so is aggressively saying you need to do X, right? So we can kind of help massage things. If candidates are going through certain personal situations, we can help message that the right way. So the recruiter can help. They want this to go well. So I'd say leverage them and just ask them. Also, recruiters usually know the company's comp structure. You can ask like, hey, if we need to negotiate, do you think there's more flex on the base or the bonus or the sign-on bonus or the equity? Like what levers can we pull here between all these different things? All right. And last, let's talk real quick about feedback and then we'll open it up to any other Q&A. So the biggest complaint I hear from people, I don't know about your experience, is they don't hear back from recruiters. And this is after they've gone on interviews and they just cannot believe that they're not hearing back. And so a lot of what I tell people is most of the time it has nothing to do with you. And it's so easy to internalize it and to be like, oh, I'm a no, or oh, I did terribly, and just like replay the whole meeting over and over again. I shouldn't have said that thing. But 9 times out of 10 is zero. Like sometimes the recruiter doesn't have the feedback. And I talk a lot in the book about the like those relationships between the recruiter and the hiring manager and the internal recruiter. And there's all these different people involved. And it all comes back to how that relationship was started in the first place. A lot of the time people assume that the recruiter and the hiring manager and the HR people are all just best friends and on text all day. Sometimes it's not set up that way. Sometimes you're just throwing stones at windows like, hi, how'd it go? So not ideal, but I talk a lot in the book about how business is won and how things are set up in the beginning and how that trust and relationship and partnership can trickle down into feedback and candidate experience and everything else. So if you don't, and you're not privy to knowing that, you don't know how tight these people are. But if the recruiter doesn't have it, they don't have it. Sometimes the recruiter is stringing you along for sure. And that's a shame when, keep this candidate warm. The number 2 candidate is interviewing, the company doesn't want to lose them. That could be the case. Honestly, just ask. I think if you were just thinking it, just ask, you will get an answer. I think a lot of people don't want to ask. You know what? Ask the question. Hey, am I number 2? Do you have someone better? Maybe it's aggressive. Maybe I'm from New York, but like, why not? Clients still figuring out what they're looking for. This is usually the case, especially if it's a new role that they've never had before and you are one of the first candidates in or it's been open for less than 2 months. Usually the client's like, oh, I think we need that actually. That happens. And it's not great, but it does. Being honest is hard or illegal. Like, what if I have heard some things like that is tricky. People are people. Or honestly, the recruiter has other things they're doing, which isn't great. But I can soapbox all day, which I won't, about recruiter incentives and how recruiters are paid. And it's based on fees and placements, not on giving feedback to people. So if you're dealing with someone that has a million things on their desk and a boss going like, where's the new business coming from? Like giving feedback to people that aren't moving ahead is just last. And my whole ethos is the book. It was like, please remember the good recruiters. So when you're hiring, like pay them. versus, you know, the people that don't give you feedback. So we can create good behavior. What can you do? Let's set up the good dynamics up front. Hey, when do you talk to this client next? I'm interviewing Tuesday. Normally, I think recruiters and clients have update calls, what, every week, every 2 weeks. When's your call? You know, let's set up a call for after, you know, just do that like that. That's easy. Give the recruiter an out. Hey, it's been a month. I know how busy you are. If you want somewhere else, you know, another direction, let me know. Be bold. I haven't heard anything. I've assumed you decided to go with another candidate. Now, you only want to do this if you are at the point where you're losing your mind, but those will get responses. If I get an email like, hey, I'm assuming that, what was it? I had a candidate recently. I have this whole like text everyone on Friday thing. And he was just about to ask me because he was the first candidate in, and I told him it was going to be like 3 weeks until the final. And he was just bombed. He's like, well, I'm assuming there's other people that are better. I told him, no, like, just you're the first one that had final. They need a slate, unfortunately. And we talked about it and he understood. And I kept him posted through it. But say, be bold, you will get a response. But the best thing to do is just keep your mind off of it and get other interviews so you stay sane, say, through all of that. So that is the gist of it. So what we talked about was being memorable, how you leave a lasting impression, how you create relationships over transactions, how to know what you want and say what you want, and how to be a giver. And there's my LinkedIn, so you can connect with me. I've got a ton in the book. It's on Amazon. And yeah, so that is a glimpse of behind the scenes. What are there? Oh, here we go. James said, what are your thoughts regarding paid search firms? They pitch a pretty compelling argument with professional profile, bio, new resume design. Oh, you mean like candidate agent sort of thing? I think that's what you mean, James. Oh, your own website. Yeah. Okay. So I'm not going to knock whoever you talked to, but I have asked multiple people in my network about these and they've all said, don't do it. Just honestly, just as a friend, like they've all said that to me. I have yet to find someone that said, this company got me a job, just because I don't get how it works. Like I don't like, if someone, first of all, I just give lots of free unsolicited advice. Like all this stuff is just like, I just want to help. But if someone said, hey, somewhere, I'll pay you. I will pay you. And can you introduce me to everyone over at Capital One or wherever, you know, 'cause I used to do a ton of work for them. Like that's a tricky situation, you know, like I think Capital One would be like, why are you sending us all these people? Oh, because they paid me. That's weird. You know, and then it's just I can't do that all the time with everyone. Like there's only so many times I can make an opportunistic introduction. And again, recruiters are sending the top people in the world for a role. I know that this is more opportunistic. So I don't get how that works. So yeah, but if anyone knows of any reverse recruiters, as I've heard they're called, that are good, like please put them in the chat, because I just haven't heard of any that have helped. And I hate to be so bold about it, but I just haven't. What other questions do you all have?
Summer, I have one.
Yeah.
So you're talking to a group of people who are mostly CPAs, accountants,
Yeah.
Financial leaders. And one of the things that I always kind of found funny as a hiring manager, because I'll get a resume and it'll say something like, well, my name's Chris, and at my last company, I implemented some cost savings measure that saved them $303,792.12.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit there and I go, really, 12 cents, right? So to me, it was always like, you're a little bit too precise. And I don't know, if you're coming from General Motors,
Mm-hmm.
$303,000 is like money on the floor, right?
Yeah.
If you're coming from a real small company, $303,000 is a big deal. So it's hard to tell, I think, when people throw specifics in there, is that on point or is it not on point? Is it demonstrating that you're skilled or are you just lucky? So what are your thoughts in terms of like definitional detail like that in a resume or a cover letter?
Yeah, my head just went in a few different places, but where I ended up is what separates more junior folks from more senior folks is they talk about responsibilities and tasks versus impact. And so I think if this person could tie it up in a bow, and then if you end every bullet with, and so what, right? Like, is there more you could say about that? So they could say, I did this thing with the 12 cents and, through that, whatever the number was, but that resulted in whatever percent in customer or revenue, or, just how did that impact the business? How did that impact the customer? What did that do for the journey of the company? And so, because that's the journey, I think we're matching journeys versus matching dollars and cents, like you're saying. So if someone could think, like, how would your CEO describe your job versus how would your direct report describe your job? And that's what elevates the conversation to the next level of, because of this, look at all the cool things that happened versus I did all these things. So I think that would help also put it in cross industry perspective and just make it more relatable. That's my quick off the cuff response.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right, let's see. Tim, when you're told no, is there value to trying to get a reason why? Yes, for sure. So, and that was a direct message. I don't think it was a secret though. So with Tim's question, if you're getting no's, negative feedback, I'm assuming you're meaning, you want to know why. I would say, first of all, I didn't say it earlier. The easiest way to get feedback is to respond well to feedback and to ask for feedback all the time. So if you're not getting feedback, it might be because the person thinks you won't take it well, if that makes sense. Like, do you ever have an interview with someone and they're just not a good culture fit? And I know that's in quotes. Like, how do you describe culture fit? Maybe they're too aggressive. Maybe they're too overconfident. Maybe they're just big ego, that sort of thing. Now, if that same person earlier in the process, like, I love when I interview a candidate as the recruiter and they're like, hey, we just spent an hour together. What do you think? What do you think of me? Do you think I'm the right fit? Like, what could I have done better? Like, what's your feedback? What's your honest feedback? And then I tell them, like, you know what, you kind of name dropped a little bit, to be honest with you, or you sound a little bit rehearsed, and then they say, you know what, thank you. Even today, I told someone, I had an interview with a client and I was debating to give them the feedback. And client said that they were like a little bit too dominating in the conversation and just a little bit too like, I know the best way. And we just weren't sure how that was going to go well with the hiring manager's boss. I just told him, and he's like, you know what? I can see exactly why you say that. Thank you. Thank you. And so because he took that so well, I know I have a safe place to give feedback. So yes, I would say there's total value in asking why you're a no, but you're more apt to get the real reason if you've always been asking for feedback along the way. And if you react really, really well to it, like I've given certain people feedback and said that you're too junior, and I say why, but then they just go off about how they're the best. And they're going to shut down that conversation. Let's see. Stas says, when recruiters ask for salary, are they thinking base salary or with bonus? I would ask them. I think it just depends on the industry and the company. But if I hear salary, I'm thinking base salary. If I hear total compensation, I'm thinking everything. And that's kind of a cool distinction, because then when you're throwing your anchor, you can talk in different terms. You know what? I'm looking for X total compensation, but if the base could be Y, that's really what's important to me. But like, I really need total cash compensation, base and bonus to be X, because we're going to be waiting for that equity to vest anyway. So you can kind of play with different, doesn't have to be one number. How's the market for CFOs? I honestly don't know. I'm sorry to tell that to this audience, but a lot of what I do is tech and product. So I don't know with CFOs, but I've placed finance folks before, I've placed FP&A folks before, but it's been some time. But if anyone else knows, feel free to chime in with what you're seeing in the market.
There was an article out just recently that CFO turnover is at the highest rate it's been at in 15, 20 years, something like
Wow.
that. So it's tough to be a bug these days for a
Yeah.
CFO.
I will say I've seen more recruiters landing roles in the last 3 weeks than in the past 6 months. Like, a lot of, I'm sure you see on LinkedIn, it's just flooded with sad recruiters. And they've been getting hired, which I find is the biggest leading indicator of companies are going to start hiring, because they hire recruiters before they hire. So I'm happy to see that. Stuart says, do recruiters read LinkedIn messages? Emails are not always accessible. They do, but the problem with LinkedIn messages is they get below the fold too quick. So I'm sure you get your email and then they're gone, and then there's no real good way to track them. And so they're just missing. So I would say don't worry about, like, follow up on a LinkedIn message and don't send it at, the weekend, because they're going to be gone. They just, after like 10 messages, they're gone. But I totally read LinkedIn messages. Also, just so you know, there's different LinkedIns. There's LinkedIn, and then I have to pay for LinkedIn Recruiter. It's 2 apps on my phone, 2 different like websites, 2 different in-mail versus messages. So if I send a candidate an in-mail and you hit decline or you don't respond at all, I lose the credit. If you hit accept, I get my credit back. So it's just something to be mindful of, because recruiters might be tracking, are you actually responding to messages? It actually hurts them money-wise if you don't. Let's see. Angela, if a recruiter called about a retained search, they want to schedule you for a prep call with another recruiter, but have not called back, how long should you wait to follow up? I would wait like 2 days. I don't really know what the prep call with the other recruiter is, unless it's like you're going to interview with the client. Typically, at the larger firms, the recruiter will have a half-hour call and then say with the partner or the principal for the full interview. I don't know if that's what they mean, but I would just wait 2 days. Again, you can be bold, right? If you want to. Do you see more people expressing the lack of feedback from companies these days? It appears since COVID, feedback has fallen off. I feel like it's always been a problem, to be honest. I don't know if you guys have seen it get worse, but maybe people talk about it more. Maybe that could be. But I really think it's always been a huge issue. But again, I think it's too. I want to be careful, not just think on like soapbox, but I think it's too easy to be a recruiter. It's too easy to be transactional. Anyone can just say, I'm a recruiter, and then people can just focus on revenue. And so the recruiters that focus on feedback, let's just remember them and hire them, because it's the biggest thing I hear from everybody is that they're not getting feedback. If you're talking about direct online posting feedback, I do think that's gotten worse. I think more people are applying to roles online and not hearing anything or getting auto rejected. I think that's become a bigger thing. But I do think the more senior you get, more often than not, you're not going to land a role from an online posting. All right. Any other questions?
I'm calling the 2-minute warning. So put your offense in high gear and go down the field.
All right, good. Well, I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. If you have any feedback for me, this is still evolving a bit, so feel free to let me know what resonated or what you wished I spoke about or did differently or I should add. And yeah, happy to help in any way I can. Check out the book. If you want a PDF of the book, you just email me, I'll send it to you, but it's on Amazon too. So yeah, so good to meet you all. And thank you for taking the time.
Sri had to jump off, but as a representative of the Chicago chapter, thank you, Summer. I think this has been fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I hope everybody else did as well. And please keep us in mind. Check us out for further events. Go to Summer's LinkedIn and like her and give her whatever kudos you can give her, please, because she's doing this out of the grace of her own heart. And I think it was roll with it. So thank you, Summer.
All right, thank you all. Thanks, Chris. Take care.
Thank you.